Fine now. All of you can see, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then you can mute your phone, microphone. So now we start here with stack allocation of space. As I've discussed, will be there are two different dynamic space allocation mechanisms that we are going to discuss. One is the stack allocation of space, and the other is the heap allocation of space. So when is the stack allocation of space is used is the most important question we need to answer first. So almost all procedures that we talk about that are using that use procedures, all the compilers that use procedures and functions, they have to use this stack as a runtime memory, because for each procedure space for local variables is going to be accessed, is going to be pushed onto the stack, and that space which is used for the local variables can be shared, because one procedure finishes, then that need not have the space. So therefore the next procedure that is going to come can use the same space. So therefore sharing of space is possible in when you use stack allocation. And the non-local variables, they can have a very relatively fixed space, and that space will never change. So therefore that way also the non-local variables can have fixed space, and that is not going to change. And when is stack allocation possible is must have told you already, it's possible only when these procedures calls or the activations that can nest in time. Okay, so as I've told you already, nesting in time means they can be, one procedure can call the other procedure only after the other procedure ends. The procedure is going to return, then this procedure is going to continue its process. So that is what is going to be called as nesting in time. So when nesting in time is possible, then stack allocation is naturally going to be possible. So now let us see a simple example of what are the possibilities that can happen when stack allocation is used. When stack allocation is used, there are one procedure P is going to call the other procedure Q. So when this is going to happen, there are three possibilities that are going to be possible here. Activation of Q terminates normally, which then P resumes, and P is also going to terminate normally. Possibility number two is activation of Q aborts, and simultaneously, because P also cannot hold the situation, cannot hold the condition, P also aborts simultaneously. And condition number three is activation of Q terminates because of an exception, but still P can continue because it is able to handle the situation. These are the three possible cases when, as far as stack allocation of space is concerned. Now let us look at a simple example of where stack allocation of space is done. So here we have a simple program. This program is about it's a quicksort program. This is going to take 9 elements in an array, and it's trying to sort the elements in the array. So this program initially calls the main program initially calls the read array function, which is going to read 9 array elements, and then it is going to return back. And once the array is returned, the main function is going to keep 2 more elements. Array of 0 is going to be minus 9999, because assuming that is going to be the smallest possible number in the array, and array of a of 10 is going to be 999, supposing that is the biggest element possible in the sorted in this array, or after sorting also. So with this, the main procedure calls the quicksort function with 1 to 9 as the argument. So the quicksort, this is the quicksort procedure. This is going to call one more procedure called as the partition with the arguments that are being sent to it. And as we all know, the partition is the one procedure in quicksort which divides the array into 2 parts with the help of a separator value v, or the pivotal element. And it is divided into 2 parts, a of m to p minus 1, and a of p plus 1 to n. And then it tries to sort, and then a quicksort again calls the partition with each of them. This one which is being divided, and each of them. And again, it is with that each of them is going to divide into 2 parts, and this is going to continue until the entire array is being sorted. So this is how the quicksort program runs. And when we look at a real-time running of the program, the real-time running of the program or the real-time running of the procedure is called as an activation. So when a real-time activation is going to happen, the situation is going to be like this. So we enter the main procedure, then the read array is going to be called, then the read array procedure is left, then we enter the quick sort, and from there we enter the partition. So while we are in the quick sort, we call the partition array. Okay, and then we leave the partition, and then we again enter the quicksort with the arguments 1, 2, 3, because the array is divided in two parts with 4 as the separator. It is divided into 1, 2, 3, and then another is 5 to 9. Then we leave the quicksort with 1, 3 as the argument. Then we enter quicksort with 5, 9, the second part of the array, and so on and so forth. We leave the quicksort 5, 9. Finally, we leave the quicksort, and then finally we finish the main process. So this is the way in which an activation of a quicksort is going to happen. Now, if we observe here, there are actually 4 procedures that are being running. One is the main procedure, one is the array reading array, one is the quicksort, and then other is the partition procedure. So these 4 procedures are to be nested in time. Otherwise, stack allocation is not going to be possible. So now to understand how these 4 procedures are nested in time, okay, how they run one after the other, how quicksort is going to wait for partition to finish, and then how quicksort is going to call partition again with some other argument. So to understand all these things, this activation of a quicksort can be represented as a tree, which is called as an activation tree. So an activation tree is a data structure where we can represent the activations of procedures during the running of an entire program, and this is what is called as the activation tree. So in the activation tree, each node of the tree corresponds to one activation of the one activation. So for example, if you see here, the main is going to be one node, the read array is going to be one node, quicksort is going to be one node, partition is going to be one node. So this is the way in which each activation that happens is going to be considered as a node, and the root is the activation of the main procedure, because all of them are going to return there. So therefore, the main procedure is the root of the activation tree. So the activations are shown in pre-order. They are called from left to right. So now this is what is the activation tree of the given procedure that is being running, that was running in the previous slide. So here we have the main procedure as the root here, and the main procedure first calls the read array. So therefore, this is the leftmost node. And once the read array returns, the main procedure calls the quicksort with arguments 1, 9. Now, if you observe here, quicksort calls with partition with 1, 9, and then once it returns, it again calls the quicksort with 1, 3. Okay, and then it calls the partition with 1, 3, and so on and so forth. So by looking at this activation tree, we clearly understand which activation is going to start first, which activation is going to end, and all these things are very clear. That is the reason why activation tree is used to represent the calls during the execution of any procedure. So after all the activations end, so finally the quicksort of 1, 9 is going to end, then it is going to return to the main procedure, and then the main activation is going to end. So this is the way in which the activation tree is represented. So now, so how the activation tree is going to be organized, let us see. So now if you see the sequence of procedure calls, they correspond to a pre-order traversal. From left to right, they are going to correspond, and that is the way in which the procedure calls exist in the activation tree. If you see the sequence of returns, the sequence of returns is in the reverse of the sequence of calls. Even for any procedure, A calls B, B calls C, C calls D, for example. So D is the one which is going to first return, then C returns, then B returns, and then A is going to return. So the returns are going to be in the reverse order of the way in which the procedures are called. So therefore, the sequence of returns correspond to a post-order traversal of the activation tree. So at any given point of time, the activations that are currently open are those that correspond to a node n and its ancestors only. So all the others are going to be finished. Only those the node n and its ancestors only are going to be active at any given point of time. So this is what is about the activation trees. So now each node can be represented is going to have, each node of the activation tree is going to have some arguments, is going to take some arguments, it is going to store some values, it is going to return some arguments. These are all things are going to happen, and all of them are represented in a record called as activation record. So the procedure calls and returns are usually managed by a runtime stack called as the control stack. And in the control stack, there are going to be all the activations that are running. And each live activation in the control stack has an activation record. Okay. And activation record is going to have a few arguments. few arguments are going to be there. They are in fact going to be, they are going different for each programming language, but generally we have 7 of them here. 7 of them are shown, and these are generally going to be the constituents of any activation record for any programming language. So the first of them is going to be the temporary values, which is at the bottom of it. So the temporary values are here the temporary values such as those arising in the evaluation of expressions and all these things. They're all going to be stored in this temporary location for temporary values. Next comes the local data. Whatever are the local variables, the field for local who's going to hold the data that is local to the execution of one particular process. All the local variables and all these things, they are going to be stored in this particular location. So this is not a rule of thumb that all of these happen in the same manner. Each compiler is going to handle it differently. For example, if you look at the temporary values section, some of the compilers take registers to store the values. If registers are not possible, if there are more number, then temporary values can be used. But local data is always going to be at the same place because it's going to occupy the space in the local data. The third one comes the saved machine status, because this procedure is going to return back. This procedure is going to return back to the procedures that are called, from where it is being called, and all these things. Therefore, the saved machine status holds information about the state of the machine just before the procedure is being called. So whatever is the status that is there with the calling procedure, all those things like the values of the program counter. I think you all understand what is a program counter. The program counter keeps track of the statements in the program. So because this procedure is called from another procedure A, for example, this is a procedure B, it is being called from another procedure A. So the program counter, the status of the program counter of procedure A, which calls this procedure, has to be saved somewhere. Okay, so that after this procedure returns, it is going to be that place from where the execution is going to start. So therefore, all such information is going to be saved in this particular location. Next, the fourth one is an optional access link. This is an access link, which is optional one, which is optional. Optional link is used to refer to the non-local data that is being held in other activation records. Sometimes the global information may be required. Okay, data from other procedures may be required. In such cases, this access link is going to be used here. The optional control link is the one which is optional control link. This is going to point to the activation record of the caller. It points to the activation record of the caller, so that after this is over, the pointers, the controls can be handed over back to the activation record of the caller. Then the field for the return value is used by the called procedure to return a value to the calling. In case something is to be returned to the calling procedure, in that case, the field for return value is going to be used. Then the field for actual parameters is used by the calling procedure. The calling procedure is going to use this one, and it is going to supply the parameters to the called procedure. The calling procedure is going to supply its parameters to the called procedure with the help of this field for actual parameters, and the called procedure, when it wants to return the values, it is going to use this field for returning the values to return back to the calling procedure. So this is the way in which the activation record is going to exist. Now, if you see how the activation control stack, how the control stack grows. Now we want to see how the control stack grows, because control stack is going to grow at each point of time. At each point of time, it's going, because initially in the control stack only the main program is going to be running. So once the main program starts running, that is the only one which is going to be there, procedure. Then it goes on calling each procedure, and as it calls each procedure, the other activation records start adding to this control stack. So let us see how the control stack grows as more and more procedures are called. So initially, to start with, when in activation tree has only the main node, which is the root. Then we have an activation record, and only this is the activation record that is going to be there only for the main procedure. It has an array of 11 elements. After this, what happens is the main procedure calls the read array procedure. When the read array procedure is being called here in the control stack, in addition to the main activation record, there is one more activation record, which is the one which reads the array. If you see here, the read array is there, and which has the integer I, and which reads 9 elements and returns back to the main procedure. Once this is done, then the quicksort procedure is called with the arguments 1 to 9, with arguments 1 to 9. Okay, so when this happens, if you can observe here, there are dashed lines to the read array, because dashed lines are there because now the read array procedure is not running, its activation is finished, and the space that is occupied by this read array is now occupied by the quicksort. So because it is not active now, it is represented in the form of dashed lines. Okay, so now in the control stack there are again two procedures. There are again two activations that are being running. One is the main one. Other is the quicksort with the arguments 1, 9. Okay, so this is the way in which each activation is done. The activation record in the control stack is going to change. So now we come here at the middle of the activation. We see all these to the left of them. All these to the left of them are the activations which are no more existing. They all have finished running, and these activations are not existing. And now what is happening is that we are at a point where the Q of 1, P of 1, 3, Q of 1, 10 is finished, and we are at a point where Q of 1, 3 is the one which is active now. As we have discussed earlier, at any point of time, the control stack is going to have the current procedure which is active, and its ancestors only, the control stack. So therefore, currently we have Q of 1, 3, Q of 1, 9, and the main activation records in the control stack. So this is the way in which the activation records in the control stack grow, and then shrink, and finally all of them are going to finish, and then the result is going to be returned. This is the process of the control stack. Now when different procedures exist, different procedures are calling each other. So now what happens between a procedure that is called and the procedure that is calling? So now we'll look at how the calling sequence is going to run. So now we'll talk about designing the calling sequence. Calling sequence means when two procedures, procedure A is calling B, and what happens between both of them. So one of them is going to be called as the caller, and the other is going to be the calling. So there are going to be certain values that are being communicated between the caller and calling. So what happens with these values? So where are they generally placed? So the only place where they can be placed is the activation record. So which of them are placed at which place is what is very important. So we have fixed length items. These fixed length items are generally placed at the middle of the activation record. So this is the example here that we have here. So for example, if you see this, there are two procedures here. So this this activation record that we have here is the callee's activation record, and this from here to the top we have the caller's activation record. These are the two activation record. So anything that is fixed values, they are going to be kept here. This is the location where all the fixed values that are going to be kept. This is the middle of the activation record, and this is the place where they are going to be kept. Okay. And the items whose size may not be known early enough. Okay, they are all placed at the end of the activation record. So this is the temporaries and the local data that is going to be used here. These are kept at the end of the activation record. These are all kept at the end of the activation record. And we look at the top of the stack pointer. The top of the stack pointer is going to be kept at an appropriate place. Generally, the top of the stack pointer is kept at the end of the fixed locations, which is the fixed location that we have here, which is the control links. So this is the place where the top stack pointer is going to be placed. So now this top stack pointer, after this procedure, the callee after the callee returns, this top stack pointer again goes back to this location. It must go back to this location where it is going, which is the caller's activation record. So now if you look at this diagram, there are two more things which we have to discuss here. So this is callee's responsibility that we have here. Okay, so handling this is callee's responsibility, and so this location, which is the location for parameters and return values. Actually, these are two fields in the activation record, but to be easily managed, we have given them both of them in a single place. So because of this, this is the location where the parameters and the return values are going to be kept. So the caller is going to keep its parameters here at this location, and the return values are also by the callee are going to be kept in this location, and they are going to be exchanged. So this is the way in which division of tasks between caller and callee is going to happen. Now we'll go into each one of them. The calling sequence. We're going to divide this entire process into two parts. One is the calling sequence, and the other is the return sequence. So what happens in the calling sequence is the caller evaluates the actual parameters, and then the caller stores a return address. Okay, and the old value of the, because why old value of the top stack pointer is needed is it is kept in the machine status, so that after the callee is finished, the pointer should go back to the old location where the top of the stack pointer is pointing. So that is the reason why that is kept there. Then the callee saves the register values and other status information, because they are, once this callee is finished. Callee is the one which is being called. The one which is being called is finished. Those values in the registers, are to be revoked again and again, that the caller is going to use them. And then finally the callee initiates its local data, and then it is going to start its execution. So this is the process that happens when a procedure A calls procedure B. Okay, so the caller has two responsibilities. One is the evaluating the actual parameters and storing the return address, so that after the callee is finished, that is the address where it is going to be returned. The callee has two responsibilities. It is going to save the register values and other information that are used by the calling procedure, and then it is going to initialize its local data and start its execution. So this is what happens in the calling sequence. Now let us look at what happens in the return sequence. The return sequence is going to be like this. The callee the procedure which is being called places the return value next to the parameters. I think we have seen this is the place where the parameters are stored, and this is the place next to the parameters the return values are going to be kept. So this is what is going to happen in the return sequence. Then using the information in the machine status field, I think we have seen the machine status field in the activation record here. This is the saved machine status field. This is the place where we have seen that. Using the value in that. Okay. So using this information in the machine status field, the callee restores the top of the stack pointer. Another, because there what exists there is the caller's address where the caller has stopped. That is the address that is going to be kept there. So therefore, because the callee has finished and the execution should resume from there, therefore it restores the top of the SP, and then branches to the return address that the caller placed in the status field. Then it is going to branch to it. So there are two things. One is the execution of the procedure. This is where it is going to be done, and then the access of the activation record. This is the place which is used to access the activation record. So now although the top of the stack pointer has been is decremented with the help of the information, the caller knows where the return value is. The caller does know where the return value is because it based on the return address, it is going to understand that, and then it is going to place the top of the stack pointer appropriately. For example, the caller returns. Okay, the caller returns to the return address. Let us say somewhere here. Now the top of the stack pointer should be placed here, because as we have discussed already, the top of the stack pointer is going to exist after the fixed elements that are going to be there. So the caller is going to place it appropriately and then start using it. So that is what is going to happen here. So this is how the return sequence is going to exist for the calling sequence. So as we have discussed, the calling sequence is going to have two parts. One is the calling sequence and other is the return sequence. And this is how both the calling sequence and return sequence are going to run. Now we come to the last part of the stack allocation, and this one is we're going to talk about how variable length data is going to be handled on the stack. So question number one, do we really handle variable length data on the stack? Generally, we don't. Generally, variable length data is handled by the heap allocation. Is done in the heap allocation. Heap is the one which is going to be used, which is going to store the variable length data. Okay, so in case the stack is to be accessed, there is one advantage if we use stack for variable length data to be handled. What is the reason we prefer placing objects on the stack is we avoid the expense of garbage collecting them, because once the procedure is done, the space is automatically deallocated in the case of a stack. That doesn't happen with the heap. So when you have a heap, there is going to be separate garbage collector which is going to run to collect the garbage. So when we use a stack for the purpose, the separate garbage collection need not be used. So that is the advantage we have with variable length data on the stack. So let us look at an example strategy for allocating space of variable length on the stack. So this is here we have two activations here. So two procedures are there. Q. So these are the two procedures, and we have two activation records for procedure P and procedure Q here. So what happens with procedure P and what happens with procedure Q is what we shall see now. Now in the previous figure, we have a procedure P, and this procedure P has 3 local arrays whose size is not determined at the compile time. So here, if you see here, we have array A, array B, and array C. So these are three, and the size of them is not decided at the compile time. Okay. So therefore, what happens is in the activation record, what we are doing is only a pointer to the beginning of each array appears in the activation record. Okay. And when P executes, the target code can access the array elements with the help of the top of the stack pointer. So if we observe here, only the beginning addresses of each of the array is going to be kept here. Pointer to A, this is pointer to A, this is pointer to B, and this is pointer to C. Okay, so each one is the beginning address of the array A. Okay, so now, so when the procedure runs with the help of the top of the stack pointer, with the help of top of the stack pointer, each array can be handled, and they are going to be, and mind you, all the arrays are not going to be part of the activation record. They are after the activation record, even in the case of procedure P, and also in the case of procedure Q. Okay, now procedure Q is called by procedure P. Okay, so because procedure Q is called by procedure P, we have one more activation record for procedure Q here. So the activation record for Q starts after the arrays of P, because P activation record is there. Following that is the activation of P, and there are two pointers here. One is the top of the stack pointer, which we know already, and another one is the top pointer. So this top pointer is actually the one which is going to be used, is actually the top pointer, which is going to be used to pointing to the next activation record. So it is waiting. So it is telling the this is the place where the next activation record is going to exist. That is what is specified by the top pointer. So top underscore SP, as usual, we have discussed, points to the end of the machine status field that we have discussed earlier. Okay. So when it comes to the when it comes to handling the variable length data on the stack, so what is going to be done is the variable length data is not kept on the activation record. Instead of the variable length data being kept on the activation record, only a pointer to the variable length data is going to be kept, and the arrays are placed after the activation record. So when the procedure executes, with the help of the top of the stack pointer, all the arrays can be accessed, and that is the way in which the variable length data is going to be handled in the stack. So with this, we come to the end of the lecture. With this, we come to the end of the lecture. I just first